Hello and welcome to Faith, Friends, and Hustle, a podcast where my friends and I share stories, insights, practical tips on faith, relationships, and ambition. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with a Christian wife, mother, keynote speaker, author, and a former classmate, Renee Vidor. Renee, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, welcome. Before we get kicked off into our topic today and where we want to take this conversation, tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. I grew up in the same area as Zach, and I went to the Ohio State University. My background's in psychology, and pretty much right as I graduated, ended up getting married. I got married before that, had a baby, had another. So we've got a nice family, started pretty young. I was 21. And nowadays I get the joy of coaching, mentoring. I especially love to work with people who are faith-based and helping them connect with Jesus and connect with God and connect with their identity and their purpose. All of that is intermingled together. I also do keynote speaking on the topic of my book called Measuring Up: How to Win in a World of Comparison. And I get to be a stay-at-home mom as well. So I kind of feel blessed to be yes, there we go. You've got it. But I feel blessed to just be who God created me to be and to continue to learn who that person is. I'm still learning. It's a journey. And that's kind of where I'm at right now.
That's awesome. I didn't know you got into coaching too. That's really cool.
Yes, back in about 2015 is when I started the coaching.
Oh, wow, that long ago. Okay, I don't know how I missed that. I got everything else. Missed that.
I'm not a great marketer. Maybe that's why.
Join the club. Join the club. A journey I think I am on as well. So there is a lot to talk about and discuss there. I've been fascinated with your story and following along and seeing you on this journey and progressing and the things you've added on and when you go in through. And obviously I even miss things. So for our listeners that are just meeting you going through, what does that testimony look like? Like, how do we get from Renee in high school where I known and met through the growth to I'm writing books now and about comparison?
That's a great question. I really don't think I struggled with comparison as much when I was in high school, even though I think that's where a lot of the roots come in and the mindsets that we develop do happen. But when I became a mom, all of a sudden I became a comparaholic almost at the same time. Basically, what I found was I was struggling with like a mistaken identity. Here I thought I was going to go into a big career and I was going to conquer the world, and all this. And I'm just being honest, I became a stay-at-home mom, which is a blessing. And I'm so grateful that my husband could provide in that way that we could have those dynamics. But I really felt like I lost a piece of myself. And I didn't know what to do about that. I was a decade younger than most of the people in my area. And we had moved into kind of more of an affluent area. So it wasn't even similar to where I grew up. And I just didn't feel like I fit in. I felt like I just could never measure up. And so that started the whole journey of not fitting in. And then it kind of seeped into other areas of my life. A very quick, and I'll just say very, very quick story. When I was 27, I ended up getting breast implants, thinking that, I'm done with the babies and, I'm going to feel better about myself. I'm going to feel more like the people in my area. And guess what? Not only did that not work, it was something that allowed me to go on another journey that 9 years later, I got really sick and that totally blew up in my face. So I had those removed and all that. So that's part of my journey, my story. But thankfully, several years before I got sick, I started learning more about who God created me to be. I was going to counseling. I had some crazy things happen in my life that I had no control over and had nothing to do with me, but they affected me. So I was going to counseling, learning my identity in Christ. And that was kind of the catapult of realizing, wow, I want other people to learn this. And I still had those breast implants masks basically sewn in my body, but I didn't know at that point, those were some of the last things that needed to come out and just allow for me to really discover who God created me to be. So that's why he allowed for that journey for me, and no judgment on anyone who's has breast implants or anything like that. But it's just something I'm open about talking about because so many people do end up getting sick. And I think it's important just to note that. So anyone's welcome to reach out to me about more of that story if you want to. But yeah, that turned into a book. And that book ended up being Measuring Up: How to Win in a World of Comparison. And it was about that journey and how, I don't have to measure up to win. Basically, I can use comparison to my benefit instead of to my detriment. And while it is a secular book, it's written in a way that anyone can read it without, going into offense or something like that. Jesus shows up there, and he is the one who is the reason that I was able to really start measuring up the way that he wants us to.
Yeah. Now, when did you become a follower of Jesus?
I grew up in a Christian home, and so I'm actually I'm like, oh, I'm nervous to say this because maybe you didn't even know growing up in high school. A lot of people knew I was a Christian, but
Oh, I
I
was I was the secret Christian Catholic at that point, but yeah,
okay.
you're not alone.
Okay, well, I sure hope that people knew. I mean, because I really was an evangelist even in high school. So I had a relationship with Jesus since I was young, and I would just one-on-one with people be able to like, hey, come to youth group with me. Hey, come. And so there was a lot of people even in our high school who came to know Jesus behind the scenes that way. And that's kind of how God has always used me. But then in college, of course, we go through and we start to, even if we've been believers, we learn more about, wait a minute, what do I really believe? What's my faith? And what was, either my parents or what I've learned. And so I went through a really neat process, and I'm so grateful that he allowed for me to, I wouldn't say I never struggled in my faith, but I definitely challenged things that helped me to really identify who I am and also who he is. And I think that's the most important part, is who he is.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's so important when we talk about that journey, because I often find with leaders and people I work through, influencers, and when I say leaders, right, anyone who is influencing a behavior, a thought, so that's mom, dad, grandpas,
Yep.
or corporate structure wise, right? You are leading when you're able to influence in that. And I think so often as we progress, and it sounds like you were really blessed where you had that relationship with God. I always say, I think I believed I didn't have a good relationship, but that identity piece always comes up. And it seems like there's this transition piece, right? Where it's, I'm no longer finding identity in what I do, what I have, breast implants, whatever it is, my identity, and transferring it to, now I have identity in something else that's outside of me. And it's such a relief of pressure that I think it just allows you to blossom, to grow, and then to go after maybe some more of the ambitious things we ever thought of, like writing a book.
Right? I agree with you completely, because when we are identifying with ourselves and our roles, like, oh, I'm either a student or I'm a leader, or, all these I am statements that we have. I'm a mom, I'm a parent, I'm a podcaster. All of those things get in the way because those are roles, and any of those can be taken away. I mean, even not to go like really sad, but, we could lose our children. We could lose our spouse and no longer be a wife or husband. There's always something that can be lost. But when we find our identity in him, in our creator, then that can't be lost. Kind of like the story of Job. And so I look at that with the purpose. If we are finding our identity in him, then he unleashes all the purposes that are within us. I don't believe that there's just one. Like my purpose in life isn't to write a book. My purpose in life isn't just to parent or just anything. It's like daily living out our purposes. And then all these things happen that are really neat and seem grandiose or amazing at times. But really, they were all based off of obedience daily, which is really what I think purpose is.
Yeah, consistent obedience.
Yes.
Right, is what I hear. That is the more consistent we can be, because we all fail and we all have sin in our nature. But if we can just get that consistency around our obedience, it can make all the difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, the you and I had a conversation just before this, and we were talking about legacy. And while I hear you talking about and speaking, and we got on the topic of identity, what that looks like through Christ and how he's doing that, I imagine that perspective changes what a legacy means. So this is not one of the questions I originally sent you. So sorry, putting you on the spot here. What does legacy mean to you now after reflecting on some of these trials, tribulations, and successes you've had?
I haven't put to specific words, and now you're challenging me to do that in a good way. So I appreciate that. That's something I want to really I really want to write that down and figure that out. But just off the cuff, processing that, legacy to me is living a life that those that are with me now, as well as that look back and see me later, can look and reflect and see a person that is exemplifying all out. Like basically, I'm not reserving any of who I am. I'm allowing all of that to pour out. And for me personally, I want that legacy to be something that is reflecting Christ, that's reflecting my values and the things that I know he's called me to. I think legacy could be positive or negative. I mean, if you're pouring all of yourself out, there could be, for some people, the legacy isn't something great. And so, or at least I personally wouldn't see as great. So therefore, legacy to me is living a godly life, not perfect, like you said, because none of us are held to the standard of perfection. I mean, Ephesians 4:13 tells us to measure up to the full standard of Christ. But at the same time, that measuring up is, he's already paid the price. So thankfully, that's what we're wanting to do. So I want to be known as someone who is longing for that and seeking to be that way, but knowing, gosh, you know what? He's given me grace, so I need to give myself grace. And that's part of the legacy I want to leave behind.
Yeah, that's amazing. Amazing. Good thought for off the cuff, putting you on the spot there. Thanks for playing.
Absolutely.
I think it's good. I recently been challenged. Jordan Rayner wrote a book, Redeeming Your Time. Good book. But the most important thing, one of the things I loved in there is looking at your goals. And on one of his podcasts, he talked about not just from this lifetime, but for eternity, right? And what does that look like with Christ? And that changed my perspective about legacy and that thought on it, because I thought, boy, I want to live a legacy that's like Christ, that's God honoring, that, you know, builds others up in Christ as I've been built up. But how does that last for an eternity? Yeah, and not just on this side of it, which I think is easy for humans to kind of put that time lapse on, and it's in a timeline, but it's really, we're talking about eternity.
Yeah,
a whole different perspective.
Yeah, I just mentioned before we got started here that my dear friend and mentor, who was 90, just passed away just a few days ago. And we knew that was coming. And she is someone who was looking forward to going home and looking forward to eternity, but who also lived such a life that in her 90 years, I think she came to really exemplify Christ and to have that desire when she was 70. She didn't write a book until it was published when she was 83. And even to the last day that she was able to, which even a week before she passed away, there were women that were coming, not just women, but especially women coming to her room in her assisted living home because they just wanted what she had. So her legacy is so broad. She has so many people in different seasons of her life. Just in 20 years, she's like, Renee, if in 20 years, God has allowed for me to be a part of so many people's lives. Just imagine you're 40, I'm 41 now, but you're 40 and you have all that time and you can embody all of this, and this can be part of your legacy. And so that really challenged me to make sure that anyone who comes in my presence, like she would pray every morning, Lord, please bring to me the people that you want me to impact and you want to use me through and that you want me to learn from. And I mean, that's such a powerful prayer. Like that's the kind of prayers that I think move mountains and allow for legacy to be built.
Yeah. What amazing stories you'll be able to share.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be able to share more of her legacy over the rest of my lifetime.
Yeah. Awesome opportunity. Well, I want to shift gears though, because I do want to talk about your book. I enjoyed your book. I thought it had a lot of great points and things in there. But from your perspective, if you were going to summarize it, how would you summarize measuring up? How to win in a world of comparison?
Well, it's funny because even now it's been, I don't know, 4 years or so since it came out. And there's now things that God's taught me that I'd probably even change from what was in there. So I'm kind of going to go off of a little bit of that, as well as the fact that comparison in and of itself is not bad. It is not negative, it's neutral. God actually gave us comparison. He uses it all throughout the Bible and scripture. And while that's not specifically in the book, I do start with talking about the first comparison was in the Garden of Eden. So we look at Eve talking to the serpent, and you know the story, he says, if you want to be like God, then eat this fruit. And the fact that she wanted to be like God means that she was not content with knowing and having her life as it was. She compared herself and wanted something more. So even starting as far back as that, and then looking at today, where comparison is part of social media, we're worried about the likes and the follows. We're worried about our own thoughts of ourselves. We're comparing ourselves to our past self, which I know some people say, only compare yourself to yourself. I actually don't agree with that personally. I believe that we have to find a new way to compare, and it needs to be rooted in the win method, which is what God gave me, weighing the cost of what comparison is doing currently. And normally that's negative comparison. So weigh the cost of that. If you don't know what it cost you, then you're not going to do anything about it. You have to know what it's costing your health, your finances. I mean, I can go down the whole list there, but you can read the book or grab the course or something like that. Then the I is innovate your identity. You need to know exactly who God created you to be. And that's an ongoing journey. So you may not know exactly, but you know who you are right now. So it's getting rid of all the false IDs, all the mistaken identities, like I mentioned myself earlier. It's also making sure that you're taking off the labels that everyone's put on you and embracing the things that God has put in you that maybe you just don't feel like you really are. Like for me, public speaking was one. I never thought I would be speaking on a podcast like this, but God actually revealed to me, this is something I want you to do. And so I stepped into that part of the identity of having a voice. And the N, so WIN, is navigate your journey. These are basically the behavioral concepts that you need to change. For instance, at some points, you're going to have to take a different path than what everyone else is going. So knowing how to do that and navigating your journey and finding the tools and the things that are helpful, the practical applications. So the book kind of takes you through that step, and along with a bunch of different stories and things that are helpful for you to identify in yourself in the whole game of comparison that many of us get trapped in.
Yeah, I love the intro of the book and talking about how comparison can be used for good. It has some good attributes, and you just can't allow it to own you, right? Or start making decision, and that happens so much. So y'all, you know, if you listen to this or if you know me, I love models. And so models really simple for a guy like me. And that's one of the things I think is great about your book, not only the win method, but you have the AAA, the triple A method, where you go through and you talk about that. As a way to question discernment, I think is involved with that. So great method. Also, I thought it was really cool in your book. At the end of each chapter, you ask a question, you get to rate yourself on kind of your thoughts and where you're at. And then what the comparison chart. That was the other thing. I think it was the cost of comparison, and it's a chart you have in there, which was really cool. So if you all are struggling with that, as we all do, or you have a season where you're struggling with that, that would be a great book to pick up, Renee's book, and go through it, have some self-reflection, and it'll walk you through that. And hear some great guidance from Renee around that, what that looks like, sounds like.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for sharing about it. It's definitely something close and dear to my heart, because being a comparaholic and now a recovering comparaholic, it's nice to actually be able to harness what God has given us. He's given us control, and we just need to use it. And that's really the message.
Yeah. Well, knowing that God's in control, what's next for you? What are you eyeing up and praying about for these upcoming days?
Oh my. So we are embracing for an election coming up, aren't we? And so that's not where I get my focus on, but I do notice that while everyone is getting their panties in a bunch, they're getting very disunified. And so part of the message that God has given me is to really bring people together in unity. So basically it's helping each person to run their race to win. I believe that we all have that purpose and that identity to discover and the calling. So especially rallying around those who either already know Christ, or at least they're claiming to be a Christian, but they may not really know how to connect with God. Or maybe they're like, yeah, I grew up with this, but I'm kind of on the fence. So it's unifying and bringing people together so that they have the ability to connect with each other, to connect with themselves, and to connect with the Lord as well. So that's the mentoring and coaching that I really enjoy doing. I just launched a course that is a follow-up with a book. So if you're not a reader, or you don't like to listen to audiobook or whatever, and you're more visual, there's like a 10 video course, a mini course that is available. I think it's like $27. So not a big investment there.
Yeah.
But those are a couple of things that I've been working on and enjoy doing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. So I listen on audio. I got to have the book and the audio. I got to do both. So got it on there. And Renee, actually, you read it. So that had to be a cool experience. That'll be a different conversation, but that had to be an awesome experience, actually narrating your book for Audible.
Yeah, do that in one day in 10 hours, which is only 5, I think, on there, but it takes 10 hours. You will have no voice. So have fun with that. If you're a voiceover person, gosh, I appreciate you.
Yeah, that had to be a unique experience. Well, we always end these with, if you're just tuning in or there was something you really wanted a listener to walk away with, what would you want to tell them?
I love this question. I want to tell you right now that no matter what you've gone through, no matter where you are right now, and no matter where you think that you're going, you are someone who is worthy. You are someone who is loved. You're someone who is completely supposed to be right now where you are, and that God has put so much potential within you. All you need to do is connect with him, and he's going to show you the path forward. So don't freak out. Be ready to embrace what he has for you. Just know that he has really big plans for you. And there's no doubt in my mind that you're listening to this right now for a reason and a purpose.
Thank you so much. It's been awesome talking with you today, hearing a little bit about your journey. We'll put in the show notes website if you want to learn more about Renee or dive into that. But friends, thank you for tuning in. God bless. We'll see you on the next episode.